He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, I watched a lot of this House Intelligence Committee hearing. We're going to spend a lot of time on this, and I went through a lot of the Gorsuch hearing today, too, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. But I'm going to tell you something as I watch this House Intelligence Committee hearing. I just realize how completely pointless so much of this is. Completely useless. Even the issue that the media and so many commentators, including on Fox, focused on during the course of and after the hearings was just, it flabbergasted me. It flabbergasted me. We have gone from media reports all but condemning, I'll call it the Trump world for lack of a better term, the Trump world for colluding with the Russians during the course of the campaign. To, can I prove that Trump world colluded with the Russians during the campaign, even though I never alleged that? I'm citing news articles. To today, Trump world is under investigation by the FBI. We've gone from, I don't know. I look at this and we know less today than we've known at any point in the last several months. I see two guys in front of this committee, the director of the NSA and the director of the FBI. All these leaks occurring with information they're collecting, or presumably collecting, investigations they are conducting, whether directly or indirectly. The unmasking of American citizens. I don't care who they are. And they're up there and they're controlling the whole damn hearing. I'm not commenting on that. Same answers, no, I'm not commenting on it. No, I'm not commenting on it. I'm not commenting. They are a creation of Congress. The NSA and the FBI. They'll only comment in secret. So we, the people, are left with leaks to the media. We don't know if the leaks are accurate or not. The media on one day stand behind their leaks. The media on the next day demand that we prove that their leaks are correct. Absolute insanity. And today the FBI director announces that the investigation... Well, Mr. Producer, cut one. Will you go ahead and play that, please? Go ahead.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016...
Now, stop there. We knew that. I'm all for it. Because they did try to interfere. They didn't have an effect, but they tried to interfere. And that needs to stop, and we need to address that. I've always said that. Not a problem. Go.
Presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
Now, this is fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating to me. So during the course of this election, I believe, the Trump group, World Trump, has been under investigation. Now, based on what? Based on what? So we know today, here's what we don't know. There have been reports about applications to FISA. We don't know. There have been reports that the second application resulted in a warrant. We don't know. There have been reports about intercepts with the Russian ambassador with Mike Flynn's name coming up. We're not sure. The Democrats are throwing around everybody's name. They even threw around the Secretary of State's name and the Secretary of Commerce, two men I don't much care for, but that's beside the point. They threw their names out there like somehow they're involved in a conspiracy. The Democrats didn't care if their questions weren't answered. They were there to pound away and make a political point. You and I already knew the Russians have been meddling in the election. You and I already knew the Donald Trump tweet, if taken literally, was inaccurate. We knew this already. That's not news. The issue to me, ladies and gentlemen, when you have the FBI director and the director of the National Security Agency in front of you is the conduct of these agencies, who's been leaking, what information was shared with the White House, what information was shared with political appointees in the government, whether it's the Attorney General or whomever, or the National Security Advisor or whomever, who had access to this information. Those were the two men to ask right there. And if they didn't want to answer, you still pound away and ask. New York Times, March 1. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. In the Obama administration's last days, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Donald Trump and Russians across the government. Well, what information did they get? And from whom did they get it? And which officials are we talking about? White House officials. Does anybody want to know? Maybe it's completely innocent. Fine. Who are they? It goes on, the New York Times. Former American officials say they had two aims: to ensure that such meddling isn't duplicated in future American and European elections. That's not the job of these officials going out the back door. And this one, and to leave a clear trail of intelligence to government investigators. Intelligence for government investigators? So, according to the New York Times, in the last days of the Obama administration, some White House officials spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of Trump and the Russians. Where did they get this from? Mr. Comey? Mr. Rogers? How did they get this information? And don't tell us you don't know. You're in charge. You're in charge. And don't tell us you can't tell us. You just told us there's an ongoing investigation. So we know there's an ongoing investigation, and we have these leaks hanging out there, and here we are, sitting here with our thumb up our nose. And to leave a clear trail of intelligence to government investigators. Why would you need to leave, if you're a White House official, a clear trail of intelligence to government investigators, quote unquote, when the government investigators are the one who are supposed to be getting the intelligence information in the first place? So we learned zero about this. Nothing. Nothing. New York Times, February 14, as I work my way back. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Donald J. Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election, according to 4 current and former American officials. Well, Mr. NSA Director and Mr. FBI Director, what do you know about this? I'm sorry, I can't comment. What do you mean you can't comment? It's been leaked to the New York Times. You told us there's an ongoing investigation. Comment. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies intercepted the communications around the same time they were discovering evidence that Russia was trying to disrupt the presidential election by hacking into the DNC, 3 of the officials said. The intelligence agencies then sought to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. The officials interviewed in recent weeks said that so far they had seen no evidence of such cooperation. And yet it's leaked. No evidence of such cooperation. And now there's an ongoing investigation. If there's no evidence of such cooperation, why is there an ongoing investigation? It goes on later in the New York Times piece. The call logs and intercepted communications are part of a larger trove of information that the FBI is sifting through as it investigates the links between Trump associates and the Russian government, as well as the hacking of the DNC, according to federal law enforcement officials. And the FBI director gets away with saying nothing about this? Not a word? When it's his management that's the issue? Or whomever they shared the information with? I'm not going to answer that. It might interfere with our investigation. Hey, let me tell you something, pal. There's been a lot of leaks that have already interfered with your investigation. Incredible. And they're off the hook. Well, you know, that Trump, he's just... Now, let's go on as we work our way back. The New York Times, January 19. And by the way, I reject the administration's position with respect to Russia, or at least its stated position earlier. I'm not a code pink Republican. I think we should muscle up NATO. I think Russia's the enemy. I don't think there's any question about it. But that's beside the point. January 19, New York Times. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies, so there we have the head of the NSA, the head of the FBI. One reveals that there's an ongoing investigation, and pretty much beyond that, I'm not answering any questions. Now, there are a couple things they said that I want to point to, but pretty much I'm not going to answer any questions. That's what he says. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies, January 19, New York Times, are examining intercepted communications and financial transactions. It's part of a broad investigation into possible links between Russian officials and associates of President-elect Donald Trump. Now, we can assume which individuals they're talking about. They've been leaked to the paper. The Democrats came with them. They were pounding away, so forth and so on. You and I have no idea about the truth or veracity of any of this. None of it. But it's all put out to create an impression. The FBI is leading the investigations, excuse me, aided by the NSA, CIA, and so forth. So the FBI is leading the investigations, plural, aided by the NSA, right? Now, truthfully, this is January 19. If we had read this sentence more carefully on January 19, January 20, we would have known there's an ongoing FBI investigation. It says the FBI is leading the investigations. Multiple investigations. And present tense. Not past tense. The FBI is leading the investigations, aided by the NSA, the CIA, and Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The investigators have accelerated their efforts in recent weeks, but have found no conclusive evidence of wrongdoing, the officials said. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. The White House. The White House keeps popping up in these little New York Times stories. And precious little was directed at the Obama White House. Why is that? Why is that? Because of Donald Trump's tweet? Now we can't dig further into what staffers knew what, when, how, and when? What kind of investigation is this? I'm sure CNN is going to dig into this. I'm sure Jake Tapper and Brian Stetler and Dylan Byers, I'm sure they're all very interested in knowing, going back and looking here, trying to piece it together. Boy, White House officials provided to the White House. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. January 19, New York Times. Not me. That's the New York Times. Not me. Or this one. March 1, New York Times. In the Obama administration's last day, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election, and among the reasons, to leave a clear trail of intelligence to government investigators. White House officials. Isn't it interesting that the Democrats on the committee weren't interested about any of this? Not a word of this. This guy, Adam Schiff, who is a propagandist and a hack, gives the most outrageous speech and at the end says we have to demonstrate we can be bipartisan and get to the bottom of this. And that led the whole thing. This guy Castro, I think his name is, from San Antonio, a Democrat, he's such a kook. He even said maybe this White House is leaking because sometimes people will do that sort of thing. So the White House is leaking on itself? Of course, they're not conspiracy nuts, ladies and gentlemen. They're good liberal Democrats. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
New York Times, January 12. In its final days, the Obama administration expanded the power of the National Security Agency to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intel agencies before applying privacy protections. The new rules significantly relax long-standing limits on what the NSA may do with the information gathered by its most powerful surveillance operations, which are largely unregulated by American wiretapping laws. These include collecting satellite transmissions, phone calls, emails that cross network switches abroad, and messages between people abroad that cross domestic network switches. What am I missing, ladies and gentlemen? What am I missing here? Intel shared with White House officials on the way out the door. White House officials spreading information to different agencies. The NSA, all of a sudden, after years of looking at it, January 12th, the report. On January 3, Loretta Lynch signs off on the weakening of these standards. What am I missing? I'll be right back.
One.
Is there any evidence that the Russians succeeded in manipulating the vote? Is there any evidence at all? Mike Rogers and Jim Comey are asked this at the hearing today, FBI, NSA, by Chairman Nunes. Cut 3, go.
Do you have any evidence that Russia's cyber actors changed vote tallies in the state of Michigan?
No, I do not, but I would highlight we're a foreign intelligence organization, not a domestic intelligence organization, so it would be fair to say we are probably not...
Well, it's getting harder and harder to tell, I'll be perfectly honest with you, Mr. Director Rogers. But if you're going to make comments on the election, then make comments on the election. Go ahead.
...to provide a more complete answer.
How about the state of Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
The state of Wisconsin?
No, sir.
State of Florida?
No, sir.
The state of North Carolina?
No, sir.
The state of Ohio?
No, sir.
So you have no intelligence that suggests or evidence that suggests any votes were changed?
I have nothing generated by the National Security Agency, sir.
Director Comey, do you have any evidence at the FBI that any votes were changed in the states that I mentioned to Admiral Rogers?
No.
Okay. Now, the reason the chairman obviously mentioned those states, those are key battleground states. And Trump won all of them. And so they emphatically said no. Now, the NSA guy says, that's not my area of expertise. Right. The area of expertise is intelligence gathering, and somebody's leaking like a sieve. And I keep seeing the Obama White House and Obama administration name keep popping up. And the media just don't give a damn. The lead story tonight is twofold. Number one, Both directors now emphatically say that Trump's tweets were inaccurate or something to that effect. We already knew this. From leaks, among other things. But number two, that there's an ongoing investigation. Why isn't the lead story, we can't seem to get to the bottom of the Obama administration's actions, and by that I mean all these agencies and departments. We don't know which White House officials received intelligence information. We don't know which White House officials were involved in spreading it to the other agencies. Right? Right? Isn't that what I just read? Yes. We don't know why the NSA now has more latitude to share intercepted communications. The New York Times headline. Intercepted communications with 16 other agencies. We don't know why, because they won't tell us. And in some cases, they weren't even asked. Some cases, they weren't even asked. Now, the Russians, we're told, wanted Hillary to win. Excuse me, check that. Wanted Trump to win because they hated Hillary. Putin was very angry with Hillary in 2011 because he believes she helped cause protests in Russia. Can anybody name to me a single policy that Hillary Clinton had or that was enforced that was truly harmful to the ambitions of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government? Oh, Mark, they put some, penalties in place. They were weak. But I'm trying to figure out what was our foreign policy under Obama and Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State that was so detrimental to Russia? I can't think of one. And yet she was deeply hated by the Russians. Cut 4, go.
You think that the Russians expected Secretary Clinton to win the election?
Yes, as of August, certainly. August, September.
Okay. Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Comey, you indicated as of August, September. Do you believe they ever came to a conclusion that, Mr. Trump's going to win?
No, the assessment of the intelligence community was that early on, they thought he might have a shot.
Well, let me say this. If they were watching American polls, they didn't think he was going to win. And frankly, the Trump campaign, in the last hours of the campaign, they didn't think they were going to win either. Mike Pence came on my show at 6 p.m., and we were pushing the hell out of the Florida vote. Remember that, Mr. Producer? Anyway, go ahead.
So they wanted to mess with our election, hurt our country in general. That's always the baseline. They hated her, Secretary Clinton, wanted to harm her, and thought it might have a chance to help Mr. Trump, and then later concluded that Mr. Trump it was hopeless, and they would focus then on just trying to undermine Secretary Clinton, especially with the European allies.
Got that. So up until summer and through the fall, they believed that Secretary Clinton would win. Is that true?
I think the assessment was late in the summer, they concluded, based on the polling I think a lot of people were reading, that Mr. Trump didn't have a chance, and they shifted to just focusing on just trying to undermine her.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, she did the best job of undermining herself, and all that, of course, is lost during this hearing, too, with her multiple violations of the Espionage Act. It does amaze me that the Russians hated her so, because I'm sure they were able to get so much information from her. Just my opinion. Now, how about evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign? Cut 5, go.
Mr. Clapper, the former DNI, and we all know who he is. This is someone who should know. I want to read what he said just a few weeks ago. But Mr. Clapper then went on to say that, to his knowledge, there was no evidence of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. We did not conclude any evidence in our report. And when I say our report, that is the NSA, FBI, and CIA, with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had any reflection of collusion between the members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that in our report. Was Mr. Clapper wrong when he said that?
I think he's right about characterizing the report, which you all have read.
Well, I want you to know I agree with Mr. Clapper. And at this point, everyone on this dais should agree with Mr. Clapper, because we in the committee have seen no evidence, zero, that would indicate that there was collusion or criminal wrongdoing between any members of the previous administration or campaign and Russian officials.
And this has been known now for weeks, if not longer. If not longer. So what is the information exactly that was so important to be shared with the other departments by the Obama White House officials? I'm truly wanting to know. And Mr. Comey has to be far more forthcoming about these leaks. He wouldn't even admit that they're investigating them. A little too clever there, Mr. Director. A little too clever, in my opinion. So, Trey Gowdy. Let's hear some of what he had to say today at the hearing. Cut 8, go.
Is there an exception in the law for current or former U.S. officials who request anonymity?
To release classified information?
Yes, sir.
No.
Is there an exception in the law for reporters who want to break a story?
Well, that's a harder question as to whether a reporter incurs criminal liability by publishing classified information, and one probably beyond my ken. I'm not as good a lawyer as Mr. Schiff said I used to be.
Well, I don't know about that, but the statute does use the word publish, doesn't it?
It does, but that's a question I know the Department of Justice has struggled with through administration after administration.
I know the Department struggled with it, the Fourth Circuit struggled with it, lots of people have struggled with it, but you're not aware of an exception in the current dissemination of classified information statute that carves out an exception for reporters.
No, I'm not aware of anything carved out in the statute. I don't think a reporter's been prosecuted, certainly in my lifetime, though.
Well, there have been a lot of statutes at bar in this investigation for which no one's ever been prosecuted or convicted, and that does not keep people from discussing those statutes, namely the Logan Act. In theory, how would reporters know a U.S. citizen made a telephone call to an agent of foreign power?
How would they know legally?
Yes.
If it was declassified and then discussed in a judicial proceeding or a congressional hearing, something like that.
And assume none of those facts are at play. How would they know?
Someone told them who shouldn't have told them.
How would a reporter know about the existence of intercepted phone calls?
Well, same thing. In a legitimate way, through an appropriate proceeding where there's been declassification. In any other way, in an illegitimate way.
How would reporters know if a transcript existed of an intercepted communication?
Same answer. The only legitimate way would be through a proceeding, appropriate proceeding. The illegitimate way would be somebody told them who shouldn't have told them.
Yeah, we exactly. But you, Mr. Director Comey, and Mr. Director Rogers at the NSA, you're the guys gathering the information. By whatever means, by whatever technique, wittingly, unwittingly, on purpose, by accident, affirmatively, or through the back door. You are the guys gathering the intelligence information. One or both. And entities that you're working with. And it winds up in the hands of newspapers. And to sit there and say, well, you know, that it shouldn't, it's illegitimate, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's take a bathroom break. That is unacceptable to somebody like me, who served in the Justice Department for several years. Now, you go in front of this committee, and you say this is an exceptional situation, so we're going to say, yes, there's an ongoing investigation of the potential relationship with Trump, some of his people, rather, and the Russians and so forth. Then when people want to dig in, not even ask about what kind of investigation, asking about the leaks, and so all of a sudden you clam up. All of a sudden the door's shut tight. So you have an administration that's on its heels. Its back's against the wall. And yet, other than Trump's tweet, there are legitimate questions about the prior administration. The White House officials who handled intelligence information, who spread it around the government. There are legitimate questions about political appointees at the Department of Justice and other departments that for some reason will not be asked. And I'll tell you why. Because you'll immediately come under attack. What are you, conspiracy nut? What do you have proof? No. We want somebody to look into it. We want somebody to look into it. This investigation, Comey revealed, I believe he said, I'm not going to play the whole hearing, began in July. In July. In the course of the presidential election. It began in July. And he called it a counterintelligence investigation. A counterintelligence investigation. Well, we know some of the leaks to the New York Times and other outlets are in fact accurate because they have called it a counterintelligence investigation in one or more reports. So we're getting this fan dance where the two people who ultimately are responsible for the leaks, not because they leaked, not because they wanted it leaked, not because they ordered or directed anything leaked, but they gather the information, and from their departments, their bureaus, it's disseminated. They have a responsibility not only for tracking it down in private, but for telling the American people what they know. And to ignore these New York Times pieces, it's amazing. The paper record for the left, to ignore them. And the mention of the Obama administration has expanded the power of the NSA, blah, blah, blah. White House officials, blah, blah, blah. Receiving intelligence information, blah, blah, blah. To ignore that information is to be driven by ideology and ideology alone. And yet today we learn nothing. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, I'm getting the best sleep I've ever had sleeping on a Casper mattress. It helps me have a lot of great days. It's an amazing feeling. You can have it too, you know, when you get a Casper. Casper was invented with two high-tech foams that have all the support you need, guaranteeing you get a great night's sleep. It ships for free in a box so small you won't even believe it holds a mattress. And I love that Casper lets you try the mattress for 100 nights in your own home, risk-free. In other words, you don't have to sleep on the same mattress or lie on the same mattress in a strip mall that 4,000 other people have. Yeah. And nobody looks at you. You just have it at home. You put up your other mattress against the wall. You put the Casper mattress in its place, and you check it out. And I love that Casper lets you try the mattress 100 nights in your own home risk-free. They'll pick it up and refund you everything if you don't love it. From its breakthrough design to its packaging to trying it for 100 nights, it's no wonder Casper was named one of the Fast Company's 50 most innovative brands of 2017. Sleeping on a Casper mattress is the best way to try it. Get a Casper. Go to Casper.com, use code MARK, and get $50 towards the purchase of your mattress. That's Casper.com, code MARK, $50 towards the purchase of your mattress. Casper.com, terms and conditions apply. Now, if you listen to this program, you know we have 6 Casper mattresses, 6.5. One for Barney, too. Yeah, you can get one for dogs, too. Yep. See, ladies and gentlemen, I've been around long enough, and I've been in various departments and so forth long enough, way back when I was much younger. I know these things don't just happen. I know they don't just happen. And to turn a blind eye when we have New York Times reports, which are trying to help Hillary Clinton, which are trying to help Barack Obama, but which are trying to really stick it to the Republicans and the incoming administration or the president-elect and so forth, why would you ignore potential leads in these newspaper articles? And if you're a reporter who believes that the New York Times is your Bible, why would you ignore that? We know the answer. These are called rhetorical questions because they're frauds, that's why. Listen to this interchange between Gowdy and Comey. Cut 10, go.
But some of the words that appeared in this public reporting include the word transcript, which has a very unique use in the matters that you and I are discussing this morning. That is a very unique use of that word. Wiretap has a very specific meaning. The name of a U.S. citizen that was supposed to statutorily be protected is no longer protected. So some of this reporting, let's assume 90% of it is inaccurate. That other 10% is still really, really important. And to the extent that you can rely on the dates in either the Washington Post or the New York Times, we are talking about February of this year is when the reporting first took place. So we're a month and a half and 2 months into something that you and I agree is incredibly important and also happens to be a felony. So I'm just simply asking you to assure the American people, you've already assured them you take it really seriously. Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information, but I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's
so
the
he's
right
drawing this line here. Stop. He's drawing this line here, which is remarkable, having at the beginning of the hearing said there's an ongoing investigation involving Trump World and the Russians. Now, I'm going to play this again when we come back because this is fascinating in its inconsistency and hypocrisy. I'll tell you what I think, folks. I can't prove it. I want to say it up front. I cannot prove it. Some of these reports say current and former government officials. I think some of those former White House officials may be involved in some of this. Just guessing. I'll be right back.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. There's no evidence Trump Tower was wiretapped. Have we heard this now, what, for 3 weeks, Mr. Producer? There's no evidence Barack Obama ordered wiretaps on Trump Tower or Trump's phones. We've heard this for 3 weeks. I believe it. But there's so much more than that. There's so much more. It amazes me how this White House, the Obama White House, has been immune, protected. You're not allowed to go within. You're not allowed to ask about staff. You're not allowed to get toward the president. None of that. No. You can't ask any of that stuff. It also amazes me that under a Republican Attorney General, what Mr. Comey was free to say today, and, of course, what he wasn't free to say today. He was free to say that there is an investigation going on with Trump World and the Russians and so forth, and I'm guessing it's a few of these guys. But that's said. But the fact of these leaks, the fact that White House officials had access to intelligence information that they were spreading around the various departments and so forth, that you can't ask about. Or they won't ask about, and didn't ask about. The guy who got the closest, of course, was Gowdy. And by the way, Nunes is the chairman. He is actually, I'm impressed with the guy. I really am. He's a non-lawyer. He's not like this guy Schiff, the shiftless Schiff, who was sitting there as a special pleader. But I want to play this for you again, because we had to cut it off. This is Gowdy and Comey. Cut 10, go.
But some of the words that appeared in this public reporting include the word transcript, which has a very unique use in the matters that you and I are discussing this morning. That is a very unique use of that word. Wiretap has a very specific meaning. The name of a U.S. citizen that was supposed to statutorily be protected is no longer protected.
Now, let's stop right there. You understand, Gowdy's pulling this together the way I pulled it together 3 weeks ago, truthfully, because of our backgrounds. And I laid it out on this radio program several Thursdays ago. I laid it out on Levin TV. I laid it out on Fox and Friends. And I laid it out on Hannity. And it sent shockwaves through the media and shockwaves through the Democrat Party and the left. And so they had to kind of, regroup and pivot. But these questions, as far as I'm concerned, they remain. Go ahead.
Some of this reporting, let's assume 90% of it is inaccurate. That other 10% is still really, really important. And to the extent that you can rely on the dates in either the Washington Post or the New York Times, we are talking about February of this year is when the reporting first took place. So we're a month and a half or 2 months into something that you and I agree is incredibly important and also happens to be a felony. So I'm just simply asking you to assure the American people, you've already assured them you take it really seriously. Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified
information. So he
information.
cannot assure the American people that these leaks are going to be investigated. But he comes out of the box at the hearing and tells the American people, we have a counterintelligence investigation going on related to Trump World and the Russians. So somebody please explain to me why that's okay, but the other is not. Maybe Jake Tapper knows. Go ahead.
But I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's the right way to be.
It's not the right way to be. You're being way too coy, way too clever. You see, part of the issue here, ladies and gentlemen, is, well, it's the director of the FBI and the director of the NSA. What the hell is going on? Now, here's my next question to you. If, in fact, well, we know as a matter of fact, because Comey just said they're conducting an ongoing counterintelligence investigation, right? Well, that involves affirmative investigative activities. That's not merely sitting back and waiting for an American citizen to pop up, right? On an electronic or intercept or some kind of eavesdropping or surveillance on the Russian ambassador. Maybe that's how they initially got information, but if they are conducting a counterintelligence investigation, they don't need to sit back and wait for information that may come over the transom. So they're doing much more than that. So what are they doing? Well, we can't tell you. All we can tell you is that these people, the Trump world and the Russians were investigating, counterintelligence investigation. And he won't even confirm that they're going to investigate the leaks. The leaks. I would like to know, will he be interviewing the FBI? Top officials at the White House. White House officials. Will they or won't they? And if not, why not? And I wonder, when they're all done their investigation, are they going to issue something? Or will they issue two things? Number one, a classified document where we won't know what we need to know, and then a public document which will raise more questions than answer. Look, I'm all in favor of national security. I'm all in favor of law enforcement at the federal level, too. I really am. What I'm not in favor is the politicization of these processes. And that is a danger. And that is a danger. And it's very clever how the reporting is going on, even at Fox now. Can you imagine during the course of this election, there were two FBI investigations of both candidates, one of Hillary Clinton and the other of Trump's this, that, and I'm going, excuse me. There was an investigation of Hillary Clinton for potential violations of the Espionage Act. There was no such investigation of Donald Trump. There's no moral equivalence. There's no equivalence of any kind. And yet now we know affirmatively that there has been an investigation since July, a counterintelligence investigation. And I said here weeks ago, and I've said repeatedly, did they go to the vice court? According to one report, they did, and turned down in the first instance and agreed to in the second instance. Well, what was that for? Can we see the application? No, you can't. We can't even confirm they exist. Oh, really? Really? Well, you say you're conducting an investigation. Well, fine. What are you investigating with? What kind of statutory authority? Can't tell you. Can't tell us? No, can't tell you. So it's just hanging out there. Yes, I'm sorry. We believe that's the best way to approach this. No, you don't. There are leaks going on there. Well, we can't respond to every leak. Nobody's asking you to respond to every leak. We're asking you to respond to certain leaks. Certain leaks. Certain felonies. Well, we can't do that. Well, that's what you heard. So, let's hear what Rand Paul had to say on ABC. We're going to move on to the Supreme Court soon, but I want to cover this as best I can under these circumstances. Rand Paul on ABC's This Week. Cut 12, go.
You see the president standing by that claim about President Obama. It's caused a rift now with British intelligence over the weekend. How big a problem is
All right. Stop. This British intelligence thing came from Andrew Napolitano on Fox. I honestly had never heard of it before. And my name was thrown into that. That's how pathetic and weak the reporting is. And so I don't know if it was repeated by Spicer. I haven't followed it that closely, but it wasn't something that Donald Trump threw out there with the British intelligence. Go ahead.
How does he fix it?
I think that we know one thing for sure. The Obama administration did spy on Flynn. Now, whether it was direct or indirect, somebody was reading and taking a transcript of his phone calls.
And let's stop right here. He is exactly right. Flynn was spied on, whether through the front door or the back door. They took a transcription. In other words, they recorded it, they transcribed it, and somebody leaked part of it. He was spied on. There's no other way to get around it. Go ahead.
It is very, very important that whoever released that go to jail, because you cannot have members of the intelligence community listening to the most private and highly classified information and then releasing that to the New York Times. There can only be a certain handful of people who did that. I would bring them all in. They would have to take lie detector tests, and I would say, including the political people, because some political people knew about this as well. But
because Rand Paul knows what I know, and that is what we read. And that's exactly why I pointed this out weeks ago. Really, are we supposed to pretend that we should investigate or at least have certain people interviewed? They ought to be interviewed. White House officials. Okay. Top people who worked at the National Security Council under Obama need to be interviewed. Go ahead.
Of who is releasing these highly classified conversations. And if the president was surveilled, he probably wasn't the target. I don't know that he was or wasn't, but if he was, they probably targeted someone in a foreign government, but then they listened to the conversation with Americans. But our government's talking to foreigners all the time. We can't allow people in the Intelligence Committee to release the contents of that information to the media. But you will get a deep state. You will have an intelligence community that has enormous power if that happens.
Stephanopoulos doesn't even want him to finish. He's ready to jump. Now, other than passing, we're concerned about leaks too, that kind of comment from Democrats, they didn't give a damn about what the federal government's doing. They could care less. They could care less. Because their morality is relative. Their morality is relative. So all of a sudden, because of his tweet, Donald Trump is some kind of a perpetrator. He perpetrated something, and he needs to apologize to Barack Obama. This is how screwed up this is. Trump world's under investigation, a counterintelligence investigation, since July. There have been leaks to the media. There were leaks to this Heat Street. Is that what it's called, Rich? I can never get it straight. Leaks to the BBC, leaks to The Guardian, leaks to McClatchy, leaks to the Washington Post, leaks to the New York Times, among others. All with very, very negative insinuations and suggestions, if not conclusions, which causes the Democrats to howl like coyotes for a special prosecutor. And we're supposed to pretend none of this existed. What the hell did we learn today? We didn't learn very much. And now I'm concerned we're not going to learn much at all. when I've been calling for hearings over and over and over again. Well, I thought you liked the chairman of the committee. Well, the chairman of the committee can't go up to the FBI director and start pulling out his fingernails with a wrench. What do you want him to do? We've got a big problem here, folks. I think we have a big problem. This guy Rooney in Florida, he was pretty good too, I thought. Rooney. Let's hear this congressman briefly. Cut 11, go.
When we hear that 9 former current officials had spoken to the press under the condition of anonymity, and we heard Director Comey and the chairman speak of this as a potential crime, a serious crime under the Espionage Act. Assuming if this article is accurate, who would be in a position to request the unmasking of General Flynn's identity? Would that be you?
I would have the authority to do that.
Who else would?
The 19 other individuals.
Would that include Director Comey?
I'm talking about
in the NSA alone,
within the National Security Agency, and we're talking about NSA reporting.
But would people like Director Comey also be able to request that?
Yes.
And the Attorney General and Director Clapper, are those type of people also on this list?
Again, I'm not going to talk. In general, yes, they would be.
Generally speaking, not with regard to.
All right, let me cut to the chase. What information went through the hands of political appointees in this administration? Whether at the Justice Department or the intelligence agencies or, yes, the White House staff. What information went through their hands? Because likely, ladies and gentlemen, that's where you're going to find the culprits, and that's where you ought to start your investigation. Again, I talk to you as somebody who used to serve the Justice Department. They didn't leak this information because they're concerned about the Russians. They didn't leak this information because they're concerned that the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and the rest get their man, quote unquote. They leaked it to do maximum damage to this administration. Let's stop putzing around and let's stop playing games. And that's also why the Praetorian Guard left-wing media is conducting itself the way that it's conducting itself. All focused on a 3-week-old or whatever the hell it is tweet that everybody knew was inaccurate. Everybody. And they're telling us the great 2 stories tonight from the hearings. Number 1, that those directors said that the tweets were inaccurate. Wow. Number 2, that there's an ongoing investigation. What about number 3? What about number 3? This counterintelligence investigation's been going on since July. There have been leaks all over the place. Leaks intended to hurt Trump and the incoming administration. Information, we don't even know what it was, but we know it was intelligence, went into the hands of White House officials, quote, unquote. You want to start to get to the bottom of it? You start at the top of it. That's how you start to get to the bottom of it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, we'll see what you think a little bit, and then we'll move on to the Supreme Court. Let us go to Rick, Fresno, California, on Sirius Satellite, our trucker friend. How are you, sir?
Hi, Mark. Hey, I just want to say how much I appreciate what you've given to us. I think you're a national treasure for the appreciation we have for this country because of you, for its history, basically.
Well, thank you. You're going to love my next book. If I wish I had it to give to you, I don't. Rediscovering Americanism. I know you're going to love it. Anyway, yes, sir.
What I wanted to say was, how come he's able to announce an investigation where there is no crime, where they have no evidence so far, and yet he can't announce an investigation where there is a crime?
Well, it's a good point. How come he can announce this counterintelligence investigation, but leaks related to it he can't discuss? Explain that one to me.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I think Comey
needs to go. Comey needed to go a long time ago. Liberals can't stand him. Conservatives can't stand him. The fact is, it's not a matter of liberals or conservatives. The fact is, he does not have the temperament, the equilibrium, if you will, to be FBI director, in my view. He just doesn't. Rick, God bless you, my friend. Be safe out on the streets there. I'll be right back. Boy, I hope you're going to watch Levin TV tonight. Oh, I get into this. Get into it in ways you can't do it on radio, and I really do. And I want to take a minute to say a big thanks to you and my audience and those of you who have joined us at Levin TV. We recently celebrated our one-year anniversary. You know, when we launched this and made the investment of significant resources and time, we had no idea if we would attract enough of you to make it viable. And if you haven't checked out Levin TV, I'm offering you, my radio fans, a 7-day free trial so you can try it before you subscribe. And not just Levin TV, but Michelle Malkin's new show and Steve Crowder's new show and Steve Deace's new show, and we're adding other shows that I'm not allowed to talk about yet. But if you haven't checked it out, you really ought to subscribe to CRTV. But you can get a free 7-day trial first. So if you're a Levin subscriber, you started seeing why a network like CRTV is so important. We're the only ones out there who are bringing you the truth. And you might have seen me on some of the Fox shows recently, obviously, talking about Trump and the Russians and this, that, and the other. So we're also talking about the GOP's new health care plan. I break down the proposal point by point so you have the facts. If you still haven't signed up for CRTV, if you still haven't, now's the time to do it. Start your free 7-day trial right now. If you like us, then you join us. If you don't, nothing lost. You'll get access to every episode of every show I've ever done. There's over 230 of them now, with no long-term commitment. Give us a call right now. 844-LEVIN-TV. That's 844-LEVIN-TV. That's CRTV.com. CRTV.com, ConservativeReviewTV.com, or call 844-LEVIN-TV. Start your free trial now. Really, check it out. If you like it, then you can hook in with us. If you don't, then you don't have to. And if you do hook in with us, and then you're in the military or in law enforcement or a firefighter or a veteran, you'll get a special discount. It's 30% off. And if you're just one of my listeners, which is a big deal to me, you'll get 10% off. Okay? So now's the time to jump in. 7-day free trial. 844-LEVIN-TV, Levin TV, or CRTV.com. They're there right now. You might say, well, I'll call. I'm sure they're closed. We're not closed. We're open. Check us out, I hope. Bill, Long Island, the great WABC. Go. All right, Bill's not there. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. All of you callers can wait, but I meant to do this anyway. I want to move on to some of this, the hearing with Gorsuch, the nominee, Senator Dianne Franken-Feinstein. This one touches our hearts here at Levin Radio, and you too, I'm sure. I want you to listen. They're so out of control, the left, but there's a bigger point here. Cut 14, go.
Judge Gorsuch has also stated that he believes judges should look to the original public meaning of the Constitution when they decide what a provision of the Constitution means. This is personal, but I find this originalist judicial philosophy to be really troubling. In essence, it means that judges and courts should evaluate our constitutional rights and privileges as they were understood in 1789. However, to do so would not only ignore the intent of the framers, that the Constitution would be a framework on which to build, but it severely limits the genius of what our Constitution upholds. I firmly believe the American Constitution is a living document intended to evolve as our country evolves.
Ladies and gentlemen, this gets to the heart of the matter. That which stands between us and a centralized government, a tyrannical government, is our Constitution. The Constitution is the governing mechanism of your unalienable rights. when you read the Declaration of Independence. The issue of unalienable rights didn't begin and end with the Constitution. It didn't begin and end with the American Revolution. It didn't begin and end with America. This notion of natural law, that you have rights that are eternal, that there are truths that are eternal, that there are things bigger than man and bigger than women, that there are principles that are right and actions that are wrong, that they can be intuited, they can be reasoned, they can be part of faith, they can be part of science, they can be part of knowledge. The point is this: the purpose of the Constitution is to defend the individual and his or her liberty, and yet create a government that nurtures it. It's not up to the government to be the biggest and most vibrant entity it can be. It's up to you and me. We're supposed to be all we can be, not the government. This idea of a living and breathing Constitution, as I've written about before, is one of the central themes, living and breathing Constitution, of progressivism. It's a phrase, if not invented by, but certainly promoted most aggressively by Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson spoke of the federal government as a human body with different organs. And he argued, before he became president, he argued that you can't have a body with one organ fighting the other organ, one organ checking and balancing against the other. They have to work in harmony. It's a living and breathing human being, and so he transfers that or projects that onto government. And whenever you hear somebody say we need a living and breathing Constitution, they are anti-Constitution. Because for the left, the progressive left, they're statists. That which stands in their way, the obstacles that stand in their way, are found in the Constitution, separation of powers. You have to amend the Constitution to change these sorts of things. And they support an iron-fisted, centralized government. More particularly, they support this massive, ubiquitous administrative state that they've created. Because it gets around this naughty little problem of we the people, where they can impose their social engineering plans, their radical egalitarianism, and do all those things which the Constitution protects us from. Remember, the purpose of the Constitution is to create a just governing environment that nurtures individual liberty, doesn't suffocate it, that undergirds the civil society, doesn't devour it. Those framers of our Constitution brought us the very liberty that we enjoy today, and that's under attack today. They were imperfect men. They knew they were imperfect men. They tried to address the issue of slavery, but others among them fought against them. And they knew that nonetheless they would try and create a constitutional system that does not enshrine slavery, but that creates an environment, a legal, a governing environment, that makes it possible for their children and grandchildren to throw it off. These are not my words. They are, I paraphrase, the words of Abraham Lincoln. Of Abraham Lincoln, a much greater statesman than Dianne Feinstein can ever dream to be. What is it about the left that has to continue to trash our history? What is it about the left that has to continue to trash our revered documents? A living and breathing Constitution is not a Constitution at all. Living and breathing, each individual is to be all they can be. The government's not to be all it can be. How many more human experiments must there be throughout the world, throughout the history of mankind, to prove the point? How many more? When you go in front of a judge, I don't care if it's a local judge, if it's a state judge, a federal judge, or a Supreme Court justice. You want them to apply the law and the Constitution to the facts, to the case and the controversy. not to apply a living and breathing ideology that always, by the way, manages to empower the federal government and weaken the individual. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? The level of constitutional illiteracy, the level of complete ignorance when you hear somebody like Dianne Feinstein is contemptible. She's a United States Senator. But this is the progressive mentality when it comes to the media, when it comes to academia and education, when it comes to senators and congressmen, when it comes to presidents for the most part, when it comes to the bureaucracy. There's no understanding of Americanism. That's why I wrote this book, Rediscovering Americanism. These principles, these eternal principles, these universal principles, they weren't invented by the framers of the Constitution. They weren't invented by the founders. They reasoned them. They discerned them. They were well read. They studied history. They understood Socrates and Plato. Most of all, they understood Aristotle. They understood Cicero. They tell us who they understood. They tell us where their thoughts came from. The greatest minds and experiences in the history of humankind. It's very alluring to people who don't understand the context of any of this or the American heritage for them to say, I believe that the Constitution should change with the times. Really? So should a governing document in Germany have changed with the times when Hitler came to power? I'm just giving extreme examples. Should the Constitution, if they had one at the time in China, have changed with the times when Mao came to power? When Stalin came to power and so forth? No. If you have a living and breathing Constitution, you have tyranny. Because then those who have power will do whatever those who have power want to do. Look at the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights exists to control Dianne Feinstein and to protect you. To protect you. So you and I, we're concerned about living and breathing individual human beings. They're concerned about a living and breathing government. A living and breathing government that chokes the life out of living and breathing individuals. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, I want to tell you all about the United States Concealed Carry Association. Not only do they offer top-of-the-line firearms education and training, but they also protect you legally and financially should you ever be forced to defend yourself. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what do you mean? Why would I need to be protected legally if I'm the good guy? Well, you may not realize it, but you're still most likely to be arrested, and there'll certainly be an investigation, and frankly, that means lawyer fees and bail money, and your family shouldn't have to pay all that. Not to mention, if the criminal or his family tries to sue you after, it's not uncommon for the good guy to be forced to pay over $300,000 of his hard-earned money just to clear their name when defending themselves against a home intruder. Unfortunately, it happens more than you think. That's why the USCCA exists, to protect protectors like you and me. And right now they want to give you 10 chances to win $1,500 for the gun of your dreams. And there's absolutely no restrictions. You can pick any gun, any brand, and any caliber you want, and $1,500 goes a long way to get a pistol. Entry to win $1,500 for the gun of your dreams is quick, simple, and free. Just go to defendthem.com right now to enter. They're truly changing the game for responsible gun owners. That's defendthem.com to enter, defendthem.com, and check it out. It's a great group. Dianne Feinstein, cut 15, go.
In 1789, the population of the United States was under 4 million. Today, we're 325 million and growing. At the time of our founding, African Americans were enslaved. It was not so long after women had been burned at the stake for witchcraft. And the idea of an automobile, let alone the internet, was unfathomable. In fact, if we were to dogmatically adhere to originalist interpretations, then we would still have segregated schools.
No, we wouldn't still have segregated schools. How so? No. That's a result of the living and breathing Constitution. Can somebody point to me anywhere in the Constitution where it establishes segregated schools or protects segregated schools? Anybody? No, segregation was upheld by the Supreme Court in Plessy versus Ferguson, an activist court. An activist court that believed in a living and breathing Constitution in 1896. You can't read the Constitution and embrace segregation. That doesn't mean justices don't bastardize the Constitution. We had a living and breathing court and Constitution when FDR was President of the United States. I notice she doesn't mention that with the internment camps for Japanese Americans and Americans of Japanese descent. Why doesn't she mention that? Or how about those living and breathing formerly babies in the womb that are now dead and gone? That's an activist court, too, in Roe versus Wade. I'm sorry, it is. We can talk about activism plenty. We can talk about activism plenty. And yet, this is the freest, greatest country on the face of the earth because of our historical legacy and heritage. And the disaster, the horror that was slavery was addressed. It was addressed by the Civil War with over 700,000 casualties. Ours isn't a country that ignored that issue. Ours is a country that dealt with that issue. And let me tell you a little secret. If we hadn't been a union, if we hadn't been a country, there wouldn't have been a civil war, now would there? The Lord only knows how long slavery would have gone on in the slave states. I'm sick and tired of cherry-picking history the way these leftists do, trashing their own country like we're just some other country. No, we're not just some other country. We're the greatest country. Go ahead.
On interracial marriage. Women wouldn't be entitled to equal protection under the law. And government discrimination against LGBT Americans.
Really? Women wouldn't be entitled to equal protection under the law? Really? Is that what the Fifth Amendment says? Is that what the 14th Amendment says? That women are not entitled to equal protection under the law? Look, folks, people are confusing mores of the time or lack thereof with the Constitution. Constitution doesn't prevent women from being treated equally under the law. In fact, it compels it. And over time, that's exactly what took place. Same with interracial marriage. Interracial marriage goes on now at a very, very high level. Not because of the government, but because of the diversity of the population. I could go on and on with this stuff. I notice she doesn't... all right, I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. The issue of slavery is it's a terrible fact of history. Slavery predates the founding of America. Slavery existed in America before there was what we call America the country. Slavery even occurred among the Indians in this country, and it was horrible. Slavery has occurred throughout the world. Slavery exists today. Slavery exists throughout Africa, throughout the Middle East, throughout Southeast Asia. Slavery does not exist in the United States of America anymore, and it hasn't for a long time. People try to come into this country with all backgrounds, all colors, all religions, all ages, sexual preferences, or so forth. Dianne Feinstein didn't make this a great country. The Democrat Party, which supported slavery and segregation and Jim Crow, didn't make it a great country. The American people made it a great country from all their backgrounds and histories and experiences. Our ancestors. There is no perfect country. But this is a great country, which is why people rarely leave it. And when they do, it's called a vacation, and they come back. There aren't refugees from America. They're refugees to America. Not thanks to the progressives, many of whom were extremely racist, including Woodrow Wilson. No, not thanks to them. Thanks to the men who founded this country. Imperfect men who did the best they could under their historic circumstances. The reason why originalism matters when it comes to the Constitution is there's no point in having a written Constitution if you're not going to try and comply with it. And if we're not going to comply with it, who says we shouldn't? A handful of judges? The Democrat Party? On what basis? On what authority? On what moral authority? A living and breathing Constitution. What they mean by that is an all-powerful centralized government to achieve their policy and ideological goals. That's all. It's that simple. You and I turn to the Constitution to protect us from them. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution have always been a problem to these people, as you'll learn in Rediscovering Americanism. They always attack the Declaration. I'm not going to give it all away now. I'm not going to get into it all now. And they reject the whole notion of eternal truth. For them, the world begins today with a new program, with a new mandate. For them, the world can only be a great place if your individual independence is destroyed. That's why Obama went at length on and on and on about that success, that's not yours. It's the community's success. It's the government's success. Because to recognize the power of the individual, the rights of the individual, the freedom of the individual, is to undermine progressivism, or as I call it, utopian statism. That is totalitarianism. The dictators throughout the world reject constitutions. The dictators around the world will tell you that their governments are living and breathing and they should have as much power as they need to do good. That's a despotic mindset. It's a despotic mindset. The left has gotten away with this for too long, which is why I wrote Rediscovering Americanism. It's not out until Independence Day, I'm just pointing it out. They've gotten away with their schizophrenic, two-faced agenda long enough. And it's time to go into the roots, down into the history, and explain who they are and why they are who they are, and who we are and why we are who we are. And for you all out there, and millions of you, to be able to respond to this stuff and to teach it to your children and your grandchildren, beyond the platitudes and the superficial. This country really is a remarkable place. Its history is so unique. It really is the greatest country on the face of the earth if we can keep it that way. And the people who keep attacking it, they've adopted alien, that is foreign, ideas and models and ideologies which they seek to superimpose on our country. This whole idea of government-organized collectivism, call it communism, socialism, despotism, whatever you want, that wasn't given birth in this country. That's an import. That's an import. Fabian socialism, progressivism, if you will, communism, fascism, those are not American ideas. Those are foreign ideas, European ideas. That's why when Bernie Sanders says things like, or Barack Obama or the rest, you know, in Europe they do this. We're the only country that doesn't do that. I say, no, I know that. Because we're not Europe, and we are the only country that doesn't do that. And that's to be celebrated, not attacked. You know, when John Locke finished his great book, the Second Treatise, in which he laid down the notions of the civil society, the social compact, and so forth, that was so incredibly influential on the founders of this country in the pre- and revolutionary period of America. He was asked, you know, you write all these wonderful things about human beings and the social compact and all this remarkable stuff. He was a great philosopher of the Enlightenment. But this is just fanciful. Where does this exist? He said it exists in America. America, he said, is a clean slate. It exists in America. And it does exist in America. Or at least it did. That's why the American culture is so unique and must be protected. That's why assimilation is so important. Otherwise, we assimilate into the cultures, the corrupt, destitute cultures from where people coming into this country have escaped. I'm not saying don't respect or celebrate your ancestry. I'm saying this is America with an American culture. And that's why it's so important. Why is it so important to learn English? Just because we say so? No, there's several reasons why it's so important to learn English. So you can succeed in a majority English-speaking nation. And English is a language that unites. That is, one language for a country that unites. If you have 2, 3, 4 languages in a country, you'll be a balkanized country. But there's another reason. How can you understand American history, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and so forth, if you don't understand English? Even English-speaking people fight over the words. That is, you need to be able to understand liberty. And to understand liberty in the context of our Declaration and Constitution, you need to understand English. I'm not talking about a passionate belief in it and so forth. I'm talking understanding how our system is supposed to work and protect liberty and the individual. So it's not a quote-unquote nativist thing, although that would be fine. The American people have a right to expect people to come into this country and learn their language. But that's not the primary reason. You cannot assimilate if you don't learn English. You cannot understand Americanism, really. You may have a feel for it, a passion for it, but But this takes it to the next step. So all these things are going to be discussed at great length, weave together. The individual, liberty, the civil society, and its enemies. The links, the inextricable links of natural law and what that means in a moral order, and what that means and why they're under attack. What it means to be free. What does this word freedom mean? I address that at length. What about the rule of law? What do we mean by that? I address that at length. And this private property rights issue in capitalism, why is that important in terms of securing liberty? What's one have to do with the other? You may think you know, but you'll see my take on that. And so forth. I only bring up this and Rediscovering Americanism, my new book eventually coming out, because of what Dianne Feinstein said today at the hearing for the Gorsuch nomination. And so when she talks like this and others talk like this, you know instinctively they're wrong, and you may know instinctively why, but after you read this book, you're going to have a very deep understanding in ways that most people do not have. And I am so hopeful that you will pass along your knowledge. Knowledge that should be taught in every school, but is not. I want you to hear Al Franken at the Gorsuch hearing today. Cut 16, go.
Now, Justice Scalia was a man of great conviction and, it should be said, a man of great humor. But Justice Scalia embraced a rigid view of our Constitution, a view blind to the equal dignity of LGBT people and hostile to women's reproductive rights.
Let me, you know, poor Justice Scalia is not available to defend himself. It's not that Justice Scalia is hostile to that or anything else that comes around in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now and suddenly is said to be an equal right. Justice Scalia would say it's not compelled by the federal Constitution. That if people want to do these things, and they want to do these things in the states, well, so be it. But what Justice Scalia would say is these are not recognized rights in the Constitution itself, and of course he'd be correct. They're not. What you hear Feinstein and Franken and the rest of them saying is this: the Constitution must enshrine my leftist agenda, and judges must agree with my leftist agenda, or nominees to the Supreme Court must, or I'm not going to vote for them. In other words, the Constitution is nothing more than a vessel through which to pour their agenda. And I've talked about this many times, and again I write about it in Rediscovering Americanism. That is, for them the Constitution is about their ideology. Otherwise it must be destroyed. That is the Constitution. And then they'll cite the Constitution, but only if it advances their ideology. Like now. So what they mean by living and breathing Constitution is not only the destruction of individual will, individual independence, and so forth and so on, as they seek more and more uniformity and centralization of government, which is exactly what the framers feared the most and were concerned about. But what they also mean by this is our ideology must be enshrined in the Constitution. LGBT rights, this, you'll hear them go on and on about what their agenda is. Pollution, and blah, 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 and so forth. And what the Constitution does, ladies and gentlemen, is it creates a framework for the civil society to nurture it, to protect it, to safeguard it. It's not there to advance their ideology. Go ahead.
And a view that often refused to acknowledge the lingering animus in laws and policies that perpetuate the racial divide. Judge Gorsuch, while no one...
How does the Constitution do that? I'm just curious. It clearly does not. Go ahead.
that the late Judge Scalia's love of the Constitution. The document he revered looks very different from the one that I have sworn to support and defend.
So you see this? First of all, he's slurring his speech. Well, that raises all kinds of issues, but I'll put that aside for now. Maybe he always does. So the Constitution as written is different than the one that he swore to defend. So he has sworn merely to defend his own ideology. That's what he's sworn to defend. Liberalism. Radicalism. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Anthony, Joplin, Missouri, the great KZRG. Go.
Hello, Mark. Anthony, first-time caller.
Thank you.
I just wanted to express my frustration when they're talking about the living and breathing document, and when it comes to the Supreme Court justice. I just wish, I've watched these on TV, and I've seen that they go Democrat, Republican, and I just wish that the very next Republican would stand up for the Constitution and educate Dianne Feinstein about the Constitution, and that she took an oath to uphold the Constitution as it's written, and if she has a problem with the Constitution, then she can propose an amendment to the Constitution. And there's no constitutional Republican who stands up and corrects them. They put this stuff on the record, and nobody stands up for it.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of that. There's a handful of them who try. You know, you got Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and a few others. But you listen to these people, they are driven by an ideology. And it certainly isn't they're certainly not driven by the Constitution. And but this explains who they are. And I'm so tired of hearing it, I decided to write at length about who we are and who they are. And so, I don't know, can I wait 3 months till the damn book comes out? I'm kind of chomping at the bit, but I'm told I have to. But you get a flavor for it. But you're exactly right. I'll be right back.
On the radio.
You know, if you see me on my way to work or a meeting, chances are I'm impeccably attired in one of my many CT shirts. They're the best shirts in my closet. People judge us by the clothes we wear. Now, if you show up to work, a meeting, or a date in a wrinkled, out-of-style shirt that doesn't fit right, that's how you're going to be judged, and you're going to be remembered that way. It's time to step up your game. So I got you a special CT shirts deal. CT shirts are British-styled, using the softest, most exquisite fabrics ever. Work or casual, tie or no tie, tucked or untucked. When you're wearing a CT shirt, you look great, and you know it. So here's the deal. One CT shirt normally costs $100, but right now, you'll get 3 shirts for just $99. That's 60% off. And CT shirts come with free delivery, a 6-month quality guarantee, and free returns. If you hurry, $99 gets you 3 amazing CT shirts. Go to CTshirts/Levin. That's CTshirts/Levin. CTshirts.com. I blew it. Go to CTshirts.com/Levin. CTshirts.com/Levin. That's CTshirts.com/Levin. I love these shirts. You're going to love these shirts too. Let me repeat. CTshirts.com/Levin, Levin. Go for it now. You can get 3 for what used to be the price of 1. 60% off. 3. Trust me on this. You're going to like these shirts. I love these shirts. Mike, Middletown, New Jersey, the great WABC. Go.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. We've spoken a number of times over the years. We met face-to-face twice.
All right, my friend. That must have been uncomfortable face-to-face.
Cross the table, book sign.
Oh, all right. Yes.
Now, I'm calling in response to Dianne Feinstein's implication that the Constitution is so old and our population is now so big that it's the implication was that it's outmoded, it's outdated.
Right.
Well, the response to that, in my opinion, by the time of the Civil War, the country had already grown 10 times. It didn't physically, the geography had changed. Commercially, it was a completely different place. But, it was 85 years after it had been written. Why wasn't it outdated already? But Abraham Lincoln was able to use the Constitution as his main tool to point to that and say, going back to these principles and putting the country back on the course it had originally been on was the way to right the ship in the crisis of the Civil War.
The main argument Lincoln used was the Declaration. And you're right, the Constitution, but the Declaration, too. The Constitution is the manifestation of the Declaration. Don't you think it's time, Mike, we asked Dianne Feinstein, can we please see your proposed Constitution? Because I've said here many times, Mike, as you know, since we've been face-to-face in a way, it's time for the liberals to tell us exactly what this country is going to look like when they're done with it. It's going to be an absolute tyrannical disaster. So I would like them to tell us what they have in mind, because it's obviously constantly living and breathing the Constitution and so forth and so on. And the answer is they don't have an answer, because they're all about fake promises. They're all about power. They're all about centralization. There's nothing unique about a leftist in this country, no different than any other leftist in any other country. All right, my friend, I appreciate your call. Let's go to Paul, Medford, Oregon. The great KCMX. Go.
Hello, Mark. I would just wanted to say to Dianne that it does not have a life of its own. The framers knew that we may have to adjust or make some changes to it, and they put in Article 5 of the Constitution, which allowed us to do that. They didn't make it easy. They didn't make it a simple majority or a supermajority. They made it 3/4 so that it would not be subject to the whims of the politicians. If the power is put back in the hands of the people, if we need to adjust it, that's where it belongs.
But they obviously don't believe that. And what frustrates me, Paul, and you're so right on, is we have so-called conservatives, what I call pseudo-conservatives. They see what's going on. They see how the Constitution has been damaged. They see that these people do not believe in what it says, and when you look at stare decisis, that is precedent and so forth, that's what they demand be complied with, not the Constitution itself. We've moved so far away from it. And so when we try to get back to it, when we have these pseudo-conservatives blocking us in the state legislatures, it's appalling.
I think that our pseudo-conservatives are what I refer to as a structural Marxist. It's a thought of Marxist thought, which says that, we need to give the little people just enough so they don't rise up and kill us. So the conservatives now are starting to give away things as the Democrats have in the past. They've lost the values of individual freedom and liberty.
All right, my friend, I appreciate your call. Mike, Tallahassee, Florida, WJHC. Go.
Thank you, sir. You're a magnanimous man. I thank you for letting me on the radio with you. I want to rebuttal with Dianne Feinstein's quote of Woodrow Wilson's "Democracy rests at bottom" with Frederick Douglass's 1860 speech. What then is the Constitution? It is is it a vague, indefinite, floating substance, idle, something colored to any man's fancy? Now a weasel, now a whale, and now nothing. The American Constitution is a written instrument, full and complete in itself. No court in America, no Congress, no president can add a single word, thereto or take a single word therefrom. It is a great national enactment done by the people and can only be altered, amended, or added by the people. And, my question is, how many scores are we past 4 scores at this moment in time where that honored dead should not have died in vain, Mr. Mark?
First of all, that's beautiful what you read there. I agree. But, when I think of Feinstein, she's not really thinking of American history. She just wants to advance her agenda. And what they want, if they can get it, is 9 potentates on the Supreme Court, a Politburo of leftists. who just drive this country from one direction or the other, depending on their leftist ideology. They pretend they care about the vote. They only care about the vote if they win. Otherwise, they disdain it. And you can see what the Democrats are doing with Trump in power, the Republicans in the House, Republicans in the Senate. It's the kamikaze party. The Democrat Party has become the kamikaze party. And they're prepared to burn and pillage and do whatever they have to do politically in order to get their way. Mike, great call. I appreciate it, my friend. Bob, Middletown, Rhode Island, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Hey, Mark, good evening. First-time caller here. I'm 64 years old, retired police officer from the community here in Middletown.
God bless you. Thank you.
And served in the Army National Guards. As a matter of fact, Michael Flynn, his brother, Bill, was one of my COs here in the Army National Guards at one time.
How do you like that?
Oh, yeah.
Very cool.
Great guy. He signed the book for me, Field of Fight. The reason why I called is accountability, Mark. These people in the administration, the Obama administration, are supposed to be held accountable for these leaks. And it's a chain of command, and I'm sure if the investigation goes through, someone's going to start squealing and releasing this information and follow it all the way up the chain of command to where it came from. Where did the order come from, Mark? You see what I'm saying?
You're not allowed to ask that question. You're not allowed to ask that question.
Jesus.
I've been asking that question. I came under attack. The truth is, I'm going to keep asking the question. And you have New York Times stories here talking about White House officials getting intelligence information, which they're spreading around the government. They have leaks. They're anonymous leaks from current and former officials and all. I mean, I know where I'd start, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, this is pathetic.
You know, you work
all right,
way up
Bob,
the chain of command.
I want to thank you for your service, my friend. Nick, in Virginia, truck driver friend, Sirius Satellite, go.
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
All right.
Thanks for taking my call. Love you. I'm wondering if Trump loves Russia so much, then why is he pushing policies to deregulate the U.S. oil market, lower their taxes? So we're producing tons of oil now. It's going to cause a huge glut in oil, lower the prices, and Russia's going to face economic collapse.
Nick, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, because I haven't liked his positions on Russia either. We can fight the issues out. What does that have to do with the huge leap that the Trump campaign, or Trump world as I call it, has somewhat colluded with the Russians on the campaign? There's no evidence of that whatsoever. Now we have a counterintelligence investigation that's been going on since July.
Yep.
Going on since July, of a candidate or his world, a candidate running for president of the United States, the president at the time, the opposition party endorsing Hillary Clinton, and to me this smells like sleaze all over the place.
Yeah, totally.
It just does. And for the FBI director, I mean, the FBI director is very selective in what he would talk about. He had no problem saying, look, it was approved by the Justice Department. I can tell you there's an ongoing counterintelligence investigation. Okay, great. What about this leak with intelligence? Can't talk about that. I can't confirm that. Well, now, wait a minute. What about this guy? Can't talk about that. Can't. Very, very selective, and I would argue outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outrageous. This committee couldn't find out a damn thing.
And just like all the scandals that happened from Benghazi to whatever, Eric Holder with the gun running, the media, like I didn't hear, like Sean Spicer said today, where were they? We didn't hear one word, not one peep from them.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we all know the Democrats have loved the Russians. We all know that Ted Kennedy, the lion of the Senate, or I would say the liar of the Senate, we all know that Ted Kennedy really did conspire with the Russians in order to try and defeat Ronald Reagan. We know who the people are who are sympathetic to the communists and the Russians and all the rest. It's them. All right, my friend, thank you for your call. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's tough. When I have 10 hours of stuff and we have 3 hours, it's tough. We do our best. It's also why we have Levin TV that immediately follows this program. Have you visited Blindster.com yet? They're my favorite window treatment company. That's blindster.com. Blindster.com. The selection of custom-made blinds, shutters, and shades is amazing, and their prices are the lowest anywhere. But what really stands out to me at Blindster.com is the customer service statement right there on the website. It says, "We are passionate about the quality of our products and the satisfaction of our customers." Their commitment to you is up front and center. Owner and entrepreneur Kyle Cox, good guy, and his staff have a reputation for truly caring about your happiness. Now, I've never seen anything like it, frankly, including their fit or free guarantee. Now, what does that mean? That means that even if you accidentally measure incorrectly, Kyle will remake your blinds for free. You only pay for shipping. I love entrepreneurs like Kyle who put customers first simply because it's the right thing to do. Now, if you can use a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install the highest quality custom blind shutters and shades anywhere. And get this, you get a whopping 35% discount, 35% discount when you enter promo code MARK at checkout. So I encourage you to do it right away, whether you're doing one window, one room, or a whole floor, or a whole house. This is the place to go. And you get 35% discount. So go now if you use the promo code MARK at checkout. Blindster.com. That's blindster.com. Promo code MARK. Blindster.com. Promo code MARK. All right. Let's take a few. Well, you know what? Let's go to Susan Collins on Meet the Depressed. It's not anything we've been talking about, but I need to talk about it even with a few minutes left. Cut 19, go.
Do you believe that health care is a right, and if so, that it is a right that the government is responsible for fulfilling?
Now, what kind of question is that from Chuck Todd over at Meet the Depressed? Do you believe health care is a right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, if Chuck Todd believes this, and he's asking Susan Collins, you can almost predict the answer, then why is it that our veterans in this country who have a right to health care can't get health care when they need it, how they need it, and how much they need it? Go ahead.
Do you believe that health care is a right, and if so, that it is a right that the government is responsible for fulfilling?
I believe that as a practical matter...
Doesn't she sound like the late Katharine Hepburn? You go ahead.
People have a right to health care in that if they're sick and they go to a hospital, they're not going to be turned away. In fact, federal law requires a hospital to treat someone who comes to an emergency room. But that is the least cost-effective way to treat an individual who does not need emergency room care. So there's a lot that we can do to reduce the cost of health care by, for example, using managed care for the Medicaid program.
Do you want this woman in charge of your health care, ladies and gentlemen? And where does she get off telling us what they can get? Managed care. And then you have Chuck Todd with his set-up question. So I have a question for Chuck Todd. If health care is a right, then doctors, nurses, hospitals, all the rest, they are compelled to provide it, correct? What if they don't want to provide it? What if I'm a doctor and I say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to provide it. I'm certainly not going to provide it at that fee and so on. If health care is a right, they're compelled to provide it, aren't they? Isn't it fun talking like a fifth grader, Chuck? It's so moronic. The question's so moronic. Is health care a right? Now let's look at the Veterans Administration. Let's point this out. If you serve in our military, one of the benefits you get is health care. The Veterans Administration. Now the Veterans Administration, I guess, you have a right to get health care. So the debate over a right to get health care is a nonsensical debate. It's not a matter of a right. Do you have access to good quality medical care when you need it? Is health care a right? You should read the 1934 version of the Soviet Constitution, Susan and Chuck. Healthcare is a right. It's right in there. Healthcare is a right in the old Soviet Union. If you live long enough, maybe you'll get some. If you're not murdered, maybe you'll get some. Healthcare is a right. Well, what other rights are there? This is another problem. It's another problem. It's not a matter of a right. So many stupid people in so many big places and public places and so forth. Randy, Brooklyn, New York, the great WABC. You got 1 minute. Go.
Mark, I fail to see how a piece of paper, that is the Constitution, can protect citizens from the tyranny of government. I'm reminded of Churchill waving a piece of paper and saying...
All right, well, you're reminded of the wrong thing. The reason why that piece of paper can protect us is because of the ideals that are in it. But the very people who wrote it said if you don't have virtue, you won't have a country. So they weren't stupid. But you have to write down your ideals. You have to enshrine them in law so you have a stable and just society and people know what the law is. We're not talking about an inanimate object. We're talking about ideas that are crucial to liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. Check out Levin TV tonight. It's a real killer. Check it out. And I'll see you tomorrow on the radio. God bless you.